Before you buy another bag, look at what you're throwing away.
Every fall, folks all over this country bag up one of the best soil amendments they'll ever own and set it at the curb for somebody else to haul off. Then come April, they drive to the garden center and pay good money for something in a plastic sack trying to do the very same job. I did that for years. I just didn't know what I was throwing away or what I was buying. Behind me is what most people call yard waste: leaves, wood chips, sawdust, grass clippings, pine needles, fireplace ash, cardboard, old straw. All of it free and all of it useful if you know its job. But before you dump any of this on your garden, there's something you need to hear. 3 of the most popular free amendments on this list can make your soil worse if you use them the way the internet tells you to. 1 can starve your plants of nitrogen. 1 can shove your soil chemistry so far the wrong way it takes years to walk back. And 1 gets recommended somewhere online every single day for a job it flat out does not do. We'll get to all 3. But first, I have to fix the way most of us were taught to think about this. When a person...
The mistake starts before we ever touch the soil.
hears the word amendment, they usually hear fertilizer, food for the plant. And that's where the trouble starts, because most of what I'm going to show you today doesn't feed your plants. Not directly. What it does is repair the place the roots have to live. Fertilizer is groceries. This stuff is closer to rebuilding the kitchen, the pantry, and the plumbing. A whole lot of gardens that look hungry aren't hungry at all. They're homeless. So we're not doing a countdown. We're walking through 6 jobs soil needs done: carbon and structure, moisture, biology, cover, minerals, chemistry. For each one, I'll show you which free material does the work, how to use it, and where people get it wrong. By the end,
You need the right material for the right job, not everything.
and you won't need all 18. You'll need 3 or 4, and you'll know which. Let's start with the job nobody thinks of as an amendment at all. Carbon isn't food for your tomatoes. It's food for everything that builds the house your tomatoes live in. Bacteria and fungi eat it, and in the eating they make the glues and threads that bind soil particles into crumbs. Those crumbs are what let water soak in instead of running off, and let air reach the roots, which brings us to leaves. Shredded fall leaves are the most underrated free material in America. Run the mower over a pile and you've got mulch. Rake them into a bin and walk away and you've got something better. Penn State puts it plainly.
This is where yard waste starts behaving like soil protection.
Leaves are treasure, not trash. Shredded leaf mulch moderates soil temperature, holds moisture, and keeps weeds down. Here's where folks go wrong. They till whole wet leaves in come November and wonder why spring is a mess. Whole leaves mat and shed water like shingles. Shred them and put them on top. You aren't trying to bury them. You're feeding the surface, because that's where the soil life is. Second in the carbon pile is
And the next free source is already standing in your garden.
your own dead garden. Corn stalks, bean vines, spent stems, last season's dry skeleton. Chop it up, run it through the compost or lay it down as a rough layer, and the crop that fed you goes back to feeding the ground. Corn stalks are slow and stubborn, so chop them short or they'll still be lying there next July. The exception matters. Anything diseased comes out, anything crawling with pests comes out, and anything with mature weed seed stays out unless your pile truly gets hot. Most backyard piles don't. Third, arborist wood chips. If you can flag down a tree crew and get a load dumped, take it. Chips hold moisture, buffer temperature swings, and smother weeds better than about anything you can buy. But here's the rule the rest of this video turns on. Chips go on the surface. You do not till them into the root zone. Oregon State is clear that whether woody material...
With wood, placement matters more than most people realize.
ties up nitrogen depends on particle size and on whether you mix it in. Big chips on top, little problem. Fine wood worked into the ground, big problem. Let the worms take it down at their own speed. Wood chips aren't trying to feed your tomatoes this afternoon. They're trying to make the ground under your tomatoes better next year. Which brings us to the first material I want you to be careful with: sawdust and wood shavings. People online say
Fine wood is not just a smaller version of chips.
sawdust is great for the garden. It's a half-truth that costs you a season. Sawdust is fine-textured wood, and fine wood is what microbes attack fastest. When they do, they need nitrogen, and they'll take it right out of the top few inches of your soil. Oregon State notes that small particles like sawdust have a much greater tendency to tie up nitrogen than large chips, and that mixing woody material into the soil makes it worse. Your seedlings can't compete. They go yellow and sit there, so use it in the right places. Sawdust makes good bedding, and bedding plus manure makes good compost. It makes fine pathways, and a thin scattering on the surface won't hurt. What you don't do is rototill a truckload into the bed you're planting this spring. Useful is not the same as harmful.
The dose and placement decide whether free becomes costly.
Hold that thought. We'll hit it twice more. Second job: water. Some free materials don't feed your soil so much as give it a bank account for moisture. The best one on earth is something you make out of nothing but time. Leaf mold is what happens when you pile up leaves and let fungi work on them a year or two. No turning, no layering, no green material. Just leaves, moisture, and patience. The result is dark, crumbly, spongy stuff that smells like a forest floor. It's low in nutrients, and hear that as a feature. It isn't fertilizer, it's a soil conditioner. Worked in, it makes ground spongier so it holds water and air. Spread on top, it slows evaporation and keeps the surface from crusting. Compost is the meal. Leaf mold is the sponge. Related, and more situational, is punky wood. Old, rotted, untreated wood from a fallen log or collapsed shed. Truly rotted wood acts like a slow, buried moisture buffer, and if you're building a bed up from nothing, it's a reasonable way to fill the lower volume. Be careful, though. Fresh wood sets up the same nitrogen problem, only now it's buried where you can't fix it. And as it breaks down, the bed settles, sometimes a lot. Well-rotted wood only, down low, in beds you're building for the long haul. Not a fix for this spring. Third in this group is the one everybody knows: finished compost. Kitchen trimmings, yard waste, garden residue, run through a pile until it's dark and earthy and you can't tell what it was. Compost does both jobs. It adds nutrients, and it improves how soil holds water and air. But here's the twist nobody says out loud: more is not automatic.
Even good organic matter can push a bed out of balance.
Automatically better. Oregon State lists that among the top gardening myths there is: push organic matter too high, and you can drive phosphorus to levels that cause problems and raise soil salts along with it. The threshold they watch is around 8% organic matter. Free doesn't mean unlimited. An inch worked into a bed each year does a lot. 6 inches every spring for a decade is a different experiment. Fourth job: biology. There's a whole industry selling microbes in a bottle. I won't call it worthless, but if your ground is bare, baked, dry, and short on organic matter, pouring life into it is like dropping families off in a town with no houses. Build the housing first. Carbon, moisture, cover, less digging. The neighbors move in on their own. That said, some free materials come preloaded with biology, and the oldest is manure, mixed with whatever bedding was under it. A farm with no money for fertilizer ran on manure and crop refuse, and it worked. But composted manure and raw manure are two different substances, and the difference is food safety. Raw manure can carry bacteria.
From here on, this isn't preference, it's food safety.
That make people sick. Penn State, Maine, and Wisconsin all say about the same thing. With raw or merely aged manure, keep at least 120 days between applying it and harvesting anything that touches soil, and 90 days for crops held up off the ground. In practice, that means fall. Composted manure is the easier answer for most of us. And never use dog, cat, or pig manure in a food garden. Next, worm castings, which get sold like a magic potion. Worm composting is slower. Cooler composting, where red wigglers do the digesting. What comes out is dark, crumbly material, rich in organic matter and biological activity, improving soil structure and water holding alongside the nutrients. Here's the reframe. When you buy a bag of castings, you aren't buying a rare substance. You're buying a process. A bin, shredded paper, kitchen scraps, and a few thousand worms run that process in your basement all winter for free. The catch is scale. A home bin makes enough for houseplants, transplant holes, and small beds, not a half-acre garden. Use it where a handful matters. Last in this group, and more regional, fruit and cider pomace. If there's a press near you, you've got wet pulp, skins and seeds that most operations pay to get rid of. Let me be honest about
A free byproduct still has to prove it belongs near roots.
Research, because this one gets romanticized. Pomace is high in organic matter and composts well, but it's acidic, wet, and sugary, and the studies on using it as a soil amendment come with real cautions attached. So it goes in the pile with plenty of dry carbon and comes out as compost. It does not go fresh and fermenting against the base of your fruit trees. Good feedstock, not a fertilizer. Fifth job, and this is where the thinking really flips: cover. Sometimes the smartest way to amend soil is to put nothing into it at all. The Federal Conservation Service calls the first.
Sometimes the best amendment is simply keeping the ground covered.
Principle of soil health, soil armor, and here's what cover does. Slows erosion, cuts evaporation, moderates soil temperature, softens raindrops that would otherwise compact the surface, and shades out weed seedlings, all from something you never mixed in. First, grass clippings, free nitrogen-rich organic matter, delivered weekly, all summer. 2 rules: dry them first and go thin. Minnesota says no more than 1 to 2 inches at a time, using dry clippings, because wet grass mats into a slimy lid that shuts out air and starts to stink. And the rule that matters most: if the lawn's been sprayed for broadleaf weeds, those clippings don't come near your vegetables. I'll explain why shortly, because it's worse than
What touched that grass can travel much farther than you think.
most people think. Second, pine needles, pine straw. The myth I most enjoy knocking down. You've heard pine needles will turn your garden dangerously acidic. They won't. Fresh needles do test acidic when they drop, down around 3.2 to 3.8. But Oregon State's horticulturists are clear that as needles decompose, soil microbes neutralize them. Things struggle under a pine because of root competition and shade, not acid, which means the reverse is also true, and this trips up blueberry growers. Piling pine straw around blueberries to lower FIF will disappoint you. It's a mulch, and a good one. Holds moisture, suppresses weeds, stays put on a slope. It just isn't a FIF treatment. Third, plain corrugated cardboard. And here I'll do something you don't often see in a gardening video. Tell you the experts disagree. Oregon State publishes a guide on sheet mulching with cardboard to smother weeds when converting lawn to garden bed. Washington State has published the opposite argument for years, that paper-based sheet mulches dry out, turn water repellent, interfere with gas exchange, and don't belong in a permanent landscape. Here's where I've landed. Cardboard is a tool for a temporary job, killing sod.
When experts disagree, narrow the job instead of widening the claim.
Reclaiming a weedy path. Lay it down, overlap the seams, wet it thoroughly, cover it with real organic mulch, then let it disappear. It is not a permanent layer, and it is not fertilizer. Pull off tape and labels, and skip anything glossy or waxed. Fourth, old straw, spoiled hay, and used livestock bedding. It protects bare ground, buffers moisture, and goes into the compost stream when it's done. And it carries the most serious warning in this whole video. There's a family of broadleaf herbicides used on pastures and hayfields, aminopyralid and clopyralid.
This next warning can save more than a single crop.
And picloram among them. These don't break down the way most do. They survive the animal, the manure pile, and the compost heap, and they damage sensitive crops at concentrations measured in parts per billion. Tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, beans, peas, lettuce. Oregon State's Small Farms program has a publication on the carryover listing poor germination, dead seedlings, twisted and cupped leaves, misshapen fruit. So ask the farmer what was sprayed, and ask by product name. If you can't get a straight answer, test the material before you trust it. Plant a few bean seeds in a pot of it, grow them 2 or 3 weeks, and watch for curled, distorted growth. Beans will tell you the truth before your garden does. Free mulch isn't free if it poisons next spring's tomatoes. Sixth and last job, minerals and chemistry. This is where natural stops, meaning harmless.
Now the risk changes from contamination to chemistry.
Wood ash. If you burn wood, you've got a bucket of it, and every winter somebody tells you to spread it. Here's what it actually is. Ash isn't fertilizer so much as a chemistry tool. It carries calcium and potassium, but its main effect is the same as lime. It raises soil TF and fast, because the particles are fine and react quickly. Michigan State says ash works best when soil Ph is below 6.5, and above that you can start interfering with plant growth. Wisconsin says flat out that use should be based on a soil test. New Hampshire's figure, for a garden that needs it, is on the order of 20 pounds per 1,000 square feet, worked into the top few inches, once. So, test first. If your soil is already at or above neutral, ash is not your friend. Keep it off potatoes, blueberries, and other acid lovers. Use only clean, untreated wood ash. No painted wood, no pressure-treated lumber, no burned trash, no charcoal briquettes. Eggshells. This one hurts because everybody's grandmother did it. The claim is that crushed eggshell.
Here's a garden habit that sounds right for the wrong reason.
Prevent blossom end rot, because blossom end rot is a calcium deficiency and eggshells are calcium. Both halves are technically true and the conclusion is still wrong. Minnesota Extension lays it out. Most garden soils already have plenty of calcium. Blossom end rot is usually a transport problem, not a supply problem. Calcium moves into the fruit with water, so uneven watering and damaged roots starve that fruit, not empty soil. And eggshells break down far too slowly to be any kind of quick fix. Fix the watering. Mulch. Quit hoeing close to the stem. Put the shells in the compost, crushed fine, where they'll do a little good over a long time. Here's the sentence I most want you to carry out of this video. A material can contain a nutrient without making that nutrient available when the plant needs it. Coffee grounds. The third one I warned you about, and the biggest piece of misinformation in home gardening right now. Coffee grounds are not an acidifier. Minnesota Extension states it directly. Grounds have not been shown to
This myth survives because the chemistry sounds believable.
consistently lower soil TF. Washington State's review of the research found the EF of decomposing grounds ranging all over the map, from mildly acidic to somewhat alkaline. If you truly need to bring EF down for blueberries, that's elemental sulfur, applied off a soil test. What grounds actually are is a decent compost ingredient, carrying carbon, nitrogen, and compounds that feed soil organisms. That same research suggests keeping them under about 1/5 of your compost volume, because more than that has caused problems. And don't spread them thick and wet, because they're fine enough to seal into a crust. Coffee grounds belong in a soil building system, not in a gardening superstition. Last one. Biochar, or clean charcoal fines. Biochar is wood cooked in the near absence of oxygen, so instead of burning to ash, it becomes stable, porous carbon. Maryland Extension describes it as fine-grained, porous, resistant to breakdown, low in nutrients itself, but able to hold nutrients that would otherwise leach away, and highly variable depending on what it was made from. Hold on to that last word. Variable. That's why I won't promise you a yield increase. The research is mixed, and it depends on your soil and your material. 2 rules if you try it. Clean feedstock only, meaning untreated wood, never briquettes with binders. And charge it first, which just means mixing it into compost and letting it sit a few weeks, so it arrives already loaded instead of pulling nutrients out of your bed to fill its own pores. Start small. The black stuff isn't valuable because your plants can eat it. It's valuable because it may change the house the roots live in. If you've been taking notes thinking you need all 18 of these, I've explained this badly. You don't need 18 materials. You need to know which job your soil isn't doing. Here's how I'd sort that out standing in.
Forget the shopping list. Diagnose the job your soil can't do.
Your own garden. If your soil dries out fast and you're watering constantly, that's moisture and organic matter. Leaf mold, compost, and a real mulch layer on top. If it sits bare, bakes hard, and crusts over after rain, that's cover. Shredded leaves, wood chips, pine straw. Cardboard only if you're killing sod to open new ground. If it's thin and lifeless and you want to build it up over years, that's carbon. Leaves, chopped crop residue, compost, and woody material kept on the surface rather than tilled in. If you want more biology, don't buy biology. Build habitat, carbon, moisture, cover, compost, less digging. And if you think you're short on minerals, stop. Get a soil test. Your county extension office will run one cheap, and it tells you your pH and nutrient levels in a way no amount of internet advice can. Do that before wood ash, before lime, before anything meant to change chemistry. Guessing at soil chemistry is how good gardens get wrecked by well-meaning people. So let's sort that pile behind me into 3. Pile 1 is used now. Shredded leaves, arborist wood chips, pine needles, dry clippings from an unsprayed.
If you remember one thing, remember these 3 piles.
Lawn. These go on the surface today and start working. Pile 2 is process first. Sawdust, manure, pumice, kitchen scraps, corn stalks. Good material that has to go through a pile, a bin, or a season of waiting before it's safe near roots. Pile 3 is test first. Wood, ash, and anything meant to change your soil's chemistry. That pile doesn't move until you've got a soil test in hand. 3 piles. That's the whole system. And I'd rather you remember 3 piles than 18 materials. Because the old lesson was never that everything is fertilizer. Farms that couldn't afford to waste anything weren't being clever, they were being practical. What left the land found its way back to it, and they knew perfectly well that not every scrap did the same job. Bedding wasn't ash, ash wasn't manure. The lesson was that almost every waste stream had a job. Your job is to know which one. Healthy soil doesn't come from throwing more at it. It comes from knowing what needs doing. I put all 18 into a free field guide, sorted into those same 3 piles, with the biggest mistake and the main warning for each. The link's in the description, and it costs nothing. Go look at what you're hauling to the curb this week. I'd bet there's a soil amendment in it.